Welcome to Friday Fuel for January 20th, 2023. Join us on Sunday morning at 10 for coffee and chats, and come back Sunday evening at 5:30 for Brinner for Sunday supper, biscuits and gravy, sausage links, pancakes, and more. Stick around for bingo night after Sunday supper. Next Tuesday is Pantherpalooza, the student involvement fair. We'd love for you to stop by and hang out at our table between 2 and 5 that afternoon. And join us on Wednesday night as we continue with our theme for this semester that God invites you to love. We're learning about God's love for us and how we love ourselves and others. Thursday night, Rad Grads will meet. There will be snacks and fun and fellowship. And now, here's some fuel for your Friday. Hello, and welcome back for another week of Friday Fuel. This week on Wednesday night, we talked a little bit about God's grace. There's a lot of ways that people define God's grace. Some people use the really simple sounding definition of unmerited favor. I like to think of it in terms of the way that God's love is showing up in the world around us and how we see and experience that happening. So there's so much that we could say about grace, and different streams of Christian theology have different viewpoints on what grace is and how we experience it. And so today I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Methodist understanding of grace and Wesleyan theology of what grace is in terms of three different movements of grace that we normally describe as three different specific ways that we experience God's love in our lives. And so in Wesleyan theology, we talk first about prevenient grace, which is grace that goes before. And so we think about that as when God's grace is at work in our lives, calling us into relationship with God and bringing us into a right relationship with God in ways that we don't even know. It's grace that goes before. God is at work in our lives before we even know it. I think that's one of the most exciting things about grace, is that if I think of it in a Wesleyan understanding, it reminds me God is at work in so many ways that I will never know or understand, and God is working on me and you and everyone before we even realize it. If that's the case, then we only know that we talk about prevenient grace in sort of hindsight, like, oh, God was moving me toward this experience or this better understanding in that moment. We see that later on. Or we see how God has helped us know God's love better, even sometimes through tragedy or through things that happen that we never expected. We can see God's hand at work and how God was doing something before we knew it. So it's grace that comes before we realize that God is at work. That's one way that we experience grace in life. And then another way is God's justifying grace. And so some people like to use kind of justifying grace is God takes me just as I am. Sounds similar to justifying. So that's a way to link those two. But that's that time in our lives, could be multiple times. For some people, it's a really one significant moment. For a lot of us, it's more of a gradual, like we understand more and more the ways that we need God and the ways that we are not perfect on our own, that we're not able to be who God has called us to be on our own. And so we turn to God and ask for forgiveness for things that we've done wrong, and also for help and guidance, and we turn away from the things that distract us from God. And so we are justified. Justifying grace is the grace that's making us right with God. And so some people call that a conversion moment. And some of us don't have one moment, but we've been understanding God's grace and how it works at saving us more and more through our lives. And then the third term that we use for grace in the Wesleyan tradition is sanctifying grace. And that is the grace that we experience as we grow more and more to be like God and to be the people that God has made us to be. And so sanctifying is a way of saying we are becoming holier. Things that are sanctified are holy. And so God's grace is at work in our lives all the time, making us more holy, showing us how to live a more holy life, and to live into the people that God calls us to be. There's not any one time that we experience any one of these three movements of grace or ways that God's love is revealed to us. Often we experience all three multiple times in our lives. And it's just a helpful way. We humans like to categorize things. It's a helpful way of sort of putting into perspective that God's love becomes new to us and different to us in different ways throughout our life. And we need that grace to be different at different times, depending on what we've been doing and where we've been following God or where we haven't. So that is sort of a quick and dirty conversation about grace from a Wesleyan perspective. And I just wanted to share that today, as I've been thinking about grace recently. Maybe we'll talk about that more in the future. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you back here for Friday Fuel next week.